dusty Georgia garage, a poor mechanic named Ray Thompson took on a job he thought was just another paycheck, fixing a rusted old truck. Little did he know it belonged to a secret billionaire, a woman named Vivian Hart, hiding her fortune to chase a dream she'd lost long ago. What started as a simple repair sparked a journey of love, redemption, and a race that would change their lives forever. How far can a broken truck and two broken hearts really go? Hey, if you're loving stories that surprise and inspire, consider subscribing to catch every twist and turn. Now let's hit the road with Ray and Vivian in Long Roads and Dreams. Poor mechanic fixes junk truck. He has no idea it belongs to a secret billionaire seeking love. The late afternoon sun dipped low over Forsyth, Georgia, casting a warm golden glow across the sleepy little town. Leaves of red and amber fluttered down from the maple trees lining Old Mill Road, settling gently on the cracked pavement outside. Ray Thompson's garage. At 55, Ray was a man who'd seen better days. His broad shoulders still carried the strength of youth, but the lines etched deep into his weathered face told a story of loss and quiet resilience. The garage, a weathered wooden shack with a tin roof that creaked in the wind, was his sanctuary. It smelled of oil and metal, a comforting tang that drowned out the silence of a life lived mostly alone since his wife Clara passed a decade ago and his only son Jake left for college in Atlanta. Ray was wiping grease from his hands with an old rag when the tow truck rumbled up. Eddie, the driver, a wiry guy with a perpetual grin, hopped out and jerked a thumb toward the heap he'd dragged in. It was a pickup truck, or at least it had been once. Now it was a rusted relic, paint peeling in jagged strips, tires sagging. Like deflated dreams, and a cracked windshield spiderwebbed across the driver's side. "Somebody paid me to drop this off," Eddie said, fishing a crumpled note from his pocket. "Said you'd fix it up. Here's the deal." He handed Ray the paper and climbed back into his rig before Ray could get a word in. The note was short, scrawled in a hurried hand. "Make it run again. I'll pay double." No name, no number, just those 7 words. Ray squinted at it, then at the truck, muttering, "Double what? $1?" He chuckled dryly, but his mind flickered to Jake's latest tuition bill sitting unpaid on the kitchen. A counter. Money was tight, always had been since Clara's medical bills drained their savings. "All right, you ugly old beast," he said, patting the truck's hood. "Let's see what you've got left." He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The familiar rhythm of tools clinking against metal, soothing his restless thoughts. Ray wasn't one for sentimentality, but there was something about this truck that felt different. It wasn't some mass-produced junker. It had bones, a sturdy frame built back when things were made to last. The engine was a mess, rusted belts and a carburetor that looked like it hadn't breathed in years, but Ray could sense it had once roared with purpose. "You've got a story, don't you?" he said softly, half to the truck, half to himself. He tugged the driver's seat loose to check the wiring underneath. Something slipped out and fluttered to the floor, a faded photograph, its edges yellowed with age. Ray picked it up, his grease-stained fingers careful not to smudge it. The image stopped him cold. A young woman, maybe 20, stood beside this very truck, back when its red paint gleamed under a bright sun. She wore a simple sundress, her dark hair tied back with a scarf, and her smile was wide and unguarded, clutching a handful of wildflowers like they were the greatest treasure. Her eyes sparkled with a joy Ray hadn't felt in years. He turned the photo over, hoping for a name or date, but the back was blank. "Who were you?" he murmured, setting the picture on his workbench beside the ancient radio crooning Merle Haggard's "Mama Tried." The song's mournful twang tugged at him, stirring memories he usually kept buried. Days when he'd been that young, standing on a dirt racetrack with the wind in his face, the roar of engines in his ears. Back then, he'd dreamed of being a driver, of chasing speed and freedom across the open road, but life had other plans. A rushed marriage to Clara when she got pregnant with Jake, years of hard work to keep a roof over their heads, and then the cancer that took her too soon. Dreams didn't pay bills, so Ray had let his fade piece by piece. He shook his head, brushing off the ache in his chest. "Get a grip, old man," he told himself. "Fix the truck, take the cash, move on." But as he worked into the evening, the photo kept pulling his gaze. Who'd left it here? Why did this truck matter so much to them? Most folks would have scrapped it for parts, but someone out there wanted it alive again, and was willing to pay. That kind of stubborn hope wasn't something Ray saw every day. The garage grew quiet as dusk settled in, the only sounds the soft hum of crickets outside and the occasional clank of his wrench. Ray stepped back to survey his progress. Still a long way to go, but the truck was starting to look less like a corpse. He wiped his hands and walked out to the porch, letting the cool autumn air wash over him. The stars were just peeking out, a scattering of light against the deep indigo sky, and for a moment he felt a flicker of something he hadn't in years. Curiosity, maybe even possibility. Eddie's parting words echoed in his mind. "Watch out, Ray. Could be some eccentric millionaire's pet project." Ray had laughed it off. Millionaires didn't roll through Forsyth, and they sure didn't care about junk like this. But as he stood there, the night wrapping around him like an old friend, he couldn't shake the feeling that this truck was more than it seemed. It wasn't just a job, it was a mystery, a whisper from someone's past that had landed in his hands. He glanced back at the garage, where the truck sat under the dim glow of a hanging bulb. It looked forlorn, but defiant, like it was daring him to give it a second chance. Ray didn't know it yet, but that rusted heap was about to do the same for him. Somewhere out there, a woman named Vivian Hart was watching, waiting, her own dreams tied to that truck, and to the man who'd breathed life back into it with nothing but his calloused hands and a heart bigger than he'd ever admit. Ray took a deep breath, the scent of earth and gasoline grounding him. "All right," he said to the night, "let's see where this road takes us." The next morning dawned soft and grey over Forsyth, a thin layer of mist clinging to the fields like a whispered secret. Ray Thompson was up early, as always, the percolator hissing on the stove in his cramped kitchen, while the radio murmured a weather report about a cold front moving in. He sipped his black coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, and stared out the window at the garage across the yard. That rusted truck sat there like an uninvited guest, its bulk a quiet challenge he couldn't quite ignore. The photograph from yesterday, the girl with the wildflowers, still rested on his workbench, and though he wouldn't admit it, it had crept into his thoughts all night. By the time he pulled on his worn flannel shirt and stepped into the garage, the mist had burned off, leaving a crispness in the air that smelled of damp earth and pine. Ray flipped on the lights, the fluorescent bulbs buzzing to life, and got to work. He was elbow deep in the truck's engine, wrestling with a stubborn fuel line, when the crunch of gravel outside made him pause. Wiping his hands on a rag, he glanced up, and there she was. A woman stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the morning light. She was tall and lean, maybe early 50s, with dark hair streaked with silver pulled into a loose ponytail. Her clothes were simple, jeans, a faded denim jacket, and scuffed boots, but there was a quiet elegance to her, something Ray couldn't quite place. She carried herself like someone who'd seen the world and come out the other side a little wiser, a little harder. "Morning," she said, her voice low and steady with a faint southern drawl. "That my truck you're tearing apart?" Ray straightened, caught off guard. "Yours, huh? Guess that makes you the mystery client." He nodded toward the note, still pinned under a wrench on his bench. "Says you'll pay double. Hope you meant it. This thing's a beast to tame." She smiled faintly, stepping inside. "I meant it. Name's Viv." She didn't offer a handshake, just crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe, watching him with sharp green eyes that seemed to see more than he liked. "How's it coming along?" Slow, Ray admitted, tossing the rag onto a stool. But it'll run again, frame solid. Someone built this to last, just needs some love. He patted the hood like it was an old dog, then caught himself and cleared his throat, feeling a little foolish. You mind me asking why you're so keen on resurrecting it? Most folks would have junked it years ago. Viv's gaze flicked to the truck, and for a split second something softened in her expression, a flicker of memory maybe, or regret. It's been with me a long time, she said simply. Got me through some rough patches. Figure it deserves a second chance. She paused, then added, Don't you think things can still be worth saving even when they're beat to hell? Ray didn't answer right away. He turned back to the engine, pretending to fiddle with the bolt, but her question hung there like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing, worth saving. He thought of Clara, how he'd fought to save her, even when the doctors said it was too late. He thought of himself too, though he'd never say it out loud. Sometimes, he finally said, voice gruff, if you're stubborn enough. She let out a quiet laugh, the sound warm and unexpected. Good. I like stubborn. She stepped closer, peering at the tangle of wires and rust under the hood. You're good at this, real good. Most mechanics I've met just slap a bandage on and call it done. You're treating it like, I don't know, like it matters. It does matter, Ray said before he could stop himself. He looked up, meeting her eyes, and felt a jolt. Something about the way she watched him, steady and unflinching, made him want to explain. Folks build things like this with their hands, their time. It's not just metal, it's a piece of someone's life. Tossing it out feels like tossing them out too. Viv nodded slowly, like she understood more than he'd said. You're a rare one, Ray Thompson, she murmured, and he blinked, surprised she knew his name. She caught his look and smirked. Sign out front says Thompson's Garage. Not hard to figure. He chuckled, relaxing a bit. Fair enough. So, Viv, no last name? You gonna stick around and watch me wrestle this thing? Or you got better places to be? Got nowhere pressing, she said, pulling up a rickety stool and settling in. Mind if I stay? Been a while since I saw someone bring something back like this. Suit yourself, Ray shrugged, but he didn't mind. Truth was, he liked the company, rare as it was these days. They fell into an easy rhythm, him working, her watching, the silence between them comfortable instead of awkward. Every now and then, she'd ask a question about the engine, the tools, the tricks he'd picked up over the years, and he'd answer, surprised at how natural it felt to talk to her. As the morning wore on, the sun climbed higher, spilling light across the garage floor. Ray was tightening a bolt when Viv spoke again, her tone casual but pointed. Ever have a dream you let go of, Ray? Something big, something you'd have fought for if life didn't get in the way? He froze, the wrench slipping in his hand. The question hit like a punch, stirring up dust from corners of his mind he'd locked shut, racing. The smell of burning rubber, the roar of the crowd, the way his heart had pounded when he'd pushed a car to its limit. He'd been good. Damn good. Until Clara's pregnancy, until the garage became his world. Yeah, he said at last, voice rougher than he meant it to be. Once, doesn't matter now. Doesn't it? She pressed, leaning forward. Seems to me a man who cares this much about an old truck might still have some fight left. In him, Ray didn't know what to say. He turned away, focusing on the engine, but her words stuck like burrs. Who was this woman, showing up out of nowhere, poking at things he'd buried deep? And why did it feel like she saw right through him? He didn't notice the photograph on the bench, or how Viv's eyes lingered on it, a shadow crossing her face before she looked away. She stood, brushing off her jeans. I'll be back tomorrow, she said. Keep up the good work, Ray. You're doing more than you know. As her boots crunched back down the gravel drive, Ray watched her go, a strange mix of irritation and curiosity churning in his gut. He didn't know it yet, but Vivian Hart, wasn't just a stranger with a truck. She was a woman who'd once stood beside that very vehicle, wildflowers in hand, dreaming of a life she'd lost along the way. And now, in this quiet, little garage, she'd found a man who might just help her and himself find it again. Twilight draped itself over Forsyth like a soft blanket, the last streaks of orange fading into the deep blue of evening. Inside Ray Thompson's garage, the air hummed with the faint buzz of a single bulb swinging overhead, casting long shadows across the rusted truck. Ray had spent the day wrestling with its innards, replacing a clogged fuel filter, patching a cracked hose, and though progress was slow, he could feel the old beast starting to stir. There was a satisfaction in that, a quiet pride in bringing something broken back to life. But tonight, his mind wasn't just on the work. It kept drifting to Viv, the stranger who'd walked in that morning with her sharp eyes and sharper questions. He still couldn't figure her out. She'd sat there for hours, watching him with that calm, steady gaze, asking about his tricks with a socket wrench or how he'd learned to spot a bad gasket. She didn't push, didn't pry too hard, but her presence had a weight to it, like she was testing him. Or maybe herself, and that question about dreams. It had lodged in his chest like a splinter, nagging at him all day. Ray wasn't one for navel-gazing. He'd spent too many years just getting by to dwell on what might have been. But Viv had stirred something up and he wasn't sure he liked it. He was reaching under the dashboard to untangle a mess of wires when his fingers brushed something wedged in the frame, a small, leather-bound notebook, its cover cracked and faded. Ray tugged it free, frowning as dust puffed into the air. It wasn't much bigger than a pack of cards, the kind of thing you'd keep in a glove box for jotting down mileage or grocery lists. But when he flipped it open, the pages told a different story. The handwriting was neat, feminine, faded ink spilling across yellowed paper in tight, careful lines. Dates stretched back decades, 1970s, early 80s, and the entries weren't about gas stops. June 12th, 1978, took the truck down to Mobile today. Made $50 hauling scrap for Old Man Jenkins, enough for a week's groceries and a new pair of shoes. Mama says I should save up and leave this town, but I like the road too much. September 3rd, 1979, drove all night to Savannah. Stars were so bright I didn't need headlights. Sometimes I think this truck's the only thing that gets me, keeps me moving when everything else falls apart. Ray's breath caught as he read on. The writer, whoever she was, had poured her life into these pages. Long hauls across the South, late nights under the stars, dreams of something bigger than the small-town dust she'd come from. There were sketches, too. Wildflowers penciled in the margins, a rough outline of the truck itself, its red paint still bold in her memory. One entry near the end hit him hardest. March 15th, 1982. Made it. Sold my first company today, $10,000. Cash in my pocket. Everyone says I'm crazy to keep this old truck, but it's mine. It's proof I didn't give up. Someday I'll have everything I dreamed of, but I'll never have it all, not without someone to share it with. The words trailed off, the rest of the pages blank. Ray sat back on his heels, the notebook heavy in his hands. This wasn't just a diary, it was a lifeline, a map of a young woman's climb from nothing to something. And the truck? It was her partner in that journey. He glanced at it now, its rusted shell a far cry from the proud machine she'd sketched, and felt a pang he couldn't name. That's when the gravel crunched again outside. Ray looked up as Viv stepped into the garage, her denim jacket slung over one shoulder, a paper bag in her hand. "Brought you something," she said, holding it out. "Figured you'd be here. Elate. Smells like heaven, fried chicken from Millie's Diner." Ray took the bag, the warmth seeping into his fingers. "Thanks," he said, surprised. "Didn't peg you for the delivery type. Caught me on a good day, she replied with a half smile, settling onto her stool from that morning. Then her eyes landed on the notebook in his lap, and her face froze. Where'd you get that? Found it under the dash, Ray said, holding it up. Fell out while I was working. Yours? Viv didn't answer right away. She reached for it, her movements slow, like she was handling something fragile. Her fingers brushed the cover, and for a moment Ray thought he saw her eyes glisten. Yeah, she said at last, voice barely above a whisper. Mine. A long time ago. He watched her, waiting for more, but she just clutched the notebook to her chest, staring at the truck like it was a ghost. Ray cleared his throat, breaking the silence. Whoever wrote that loved this thing, said it got her through hell and back, figured it deserved more than the scrap heap. Viv's head snapped up, her gaze locking with his. You read it? Some, he admitted, shifting uncomfortably. Didn't mean to snoop, just got caught up. She sounded like a fighter. She was, Viv said softly, then corrected herself. I was. She let out a shaky breath, setting the notebook on the bench beside the photograph, the one Ray had found yesterday. Her fingers hovered over the image, tracing the girl she'd been. That's me, 20 years old, dumb as a bag of hammers, thinking I could take on the world with nothing but this truck and a tank of gas. Ray leaned forward, piecing it together. You hauled scrap, built a company from it? Started with scrap, she said, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Ended up with a trucking business, sold it for a lot more than 10 grand. Kept the truck, though. Couldn't let it go. She looked at him, her guard slipping just enough for him to see the weight behind her eyes. Guess I'm still that dumb kid sometimes, holding on to things I should have let die. Nah, Ray said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Not dumb, stubborn maybe, but there's something to that, keeping what matters. This truck's got soul. I can feel it, and I'm not letting it die either. Viv studied him, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, a small, grateful gesture that felt like a bridge between them. You're a good man, Ray Thompson, she said quietly. Better than most. He shrugged, brushing it off, but her words settled warm in his chest. They sat there for a while, sharing the chicken in companionable silence, the garage a cocoon against the night outside. Ray didn't know it yet, but that notebook, and the woman it belonged to, had just cracked open a door he'd long thought locked. Vivian Hart wasn't just here for a truck. She was here for something bigger, something she'd lost along the way. And Ray, with his steady hands and quiet heart, was about to become part of it. The sun hung low over Forsyth the next afternoon, painting the sky in shades of peach and lavender as Ray Thompson tightened the last bolt on the truck's rebuilt carburetor. He stepped back, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, and gave the old beast a once-over. It wasn't pretty yet. Rust still freckled its body like a bad case of acne, but the engine purred now, a low, steady growl that hadn't been there before. Ray grinned despite himself, a rare flash of pride, cutting through his usual gruff exterior. Not bad for a pile of junk, he muttered, patting the hood. He'd barely turned to grab a rag when the familiar crunch of gravel announced Viv's arrival. She stepped into the garage, her denim jacket swapped for a lightweight sweater, a thermos tucked under one arm. Smells like progress in here, she said, her green eyes glinting with something like amusement. Tell me you've got good news. Better than good, Ray replied, tossing the rag onto his workbench. She's running. Not ready for the highway yet, but she'll move. Want to hear her? Viv's face lit up, a genuine spark that made her look younger, like the girl in that faded photograph. Thought you'd never ask. She set the thermos down. Coffee, he guessed, catching the faint, rich scent, and followed him to the driver's side. Ray climbed in, the worn seat creaking under his weight, and turned the key. The engine sputtered once, then roared to life, a deep, throaty sound that filled the garage. Viv clapped her hands, laughing, a bright, unguarded sound that caught Ray off guard. Damn, Ray, she said, leaning in through the window. You're a miracle worker. Nah, he shrugged, but her enthusiasm tugged a smile out of him. Just stubborn, like you said. He cut the engine, the silence settling back in, and glanced at her. Figured you'd want to take her. For a spin, test it out. Roads around here are quiet this time of day. Viv hesitated, her fingers tapping the doorframe. Then she nodded, a slow, determined motion. Only if you come with me. Don't trust myself not to break her again. Ray raised an eyebrow. You hauled scrap with this thing across half the South, and now you're scared of a test drive. That was 30 years and 1,000,000 miles ago, she shot back, smirking. Humor me, Thompson. He couldn't argue with that. Truth was, he wanted to feel it run, too. See if the truck still had the spirit that girl in the notebook had loved so much. All right, he said, sliding over to the passenger side. You drive. Let's see what she's got. Viv climbed, in her hands settling on the wheel with a familiarity that spoke of muscle memory. She turned the key, and the engine growled awake again, vibrating through the cab. With a careful shift of gears, she eased the truck out of the garage and onto Old Mill Road, the tires kicking up dust as they rolled past the sleepy fields and weathered barns of Forsyth. Ray watched her from the corner of his eye, her jaw set, her grip steady, a faint smile playing on her lips. She looked at home here like the truck was an extension of her. They drove in companionable quiet for a while, the hum of the engine filling the space between them. The countryside stretched out wide and golden, hay bales dotting the landscape like forgotten toys. Ray cracked the window, letting the cool air rush in, and leaned back. Handle's all right, he said. Little shaky, but she's got heart. She always did, Viv replied, her voice soft. Used to take her down roads like this. Nothing but me, the stars, and whatever I could fit in the back. Felt like I could go anywhere. Where'd you want to go? Ray asked, curiosity getting the better of him. She didn't answer right away, her eyes fixed on the road. Anywhere but where I started, she said finally. Grew up in a trailer park outside Mobile. Me, Mama, and a daddy who drank more than he worked. This truck was my ticket out. Got me to places I didn't even know existed till I saw 'em. Ray nodded, letting her words sink in. He knew that kind of hunger, not the same story, but the same ache. Must have been something, building a life from that. It was, she said, then added quieter, till it wasn't. She didn't elaborate, and he didn't push. Some scars you could see without asking. They'd gone maybe 5 miles when the truck jolted, a sharp cough from the engine cutting. Through the calm. Hell, Ray muttered, sitting up. Pull over there, by the oak. Viv guided the truck off the road, the tires crunching onto the grassy shoulder just as the engine sputtered and died. A thin plume of smoke curled from under the hood. Guess she's not quite ready, Viv said, but there was no frustration in her tone, just a wry acceptance. She popped the hood and climbed out, Ray right behind her. The air turned cooler. As a light rain began to fall, soft drops pattering against the truck's rusted skin, Ray peered at the engine, spotting the problem quick. A loose hose clamp, letting fuel leak where it shouldn't. Easy fix, he said, kneeling to tighten it. Just need a minute. Viv didn't wait for him to ask. She grabbed an old umbrella from the cab, its fabric faded but intact, and held it over him as he worked. Rain beaded on her sweater, but she stood steady, shielding him from the drizzle. Ray glanced up, meeting her eyes, and something passed between them, something unspoken, but warm, like a shared secret. Thanks, he said, voice gruff. Least I could do, she replied, smiling faintly. You're the one getting muddy for my old girl. He finished the repair, wiping his hands on his jeans as the rain tapered off. Give her a try, he said, and Viv slid back behind the wheel. The engine caught on the first turn, rumbling back to life, and they both laughed. Pure, spontaneous, the sound mingling with the patter of leftover drops on the leaves above. See, Ray said, climbing in beside her. Still got some fight left. Just like us, Viv murmured almost to herself. She eased the truck back onto the road, and they drove on, the sky clearing to reveal a scattering of stars. Ray didn't say it out loud, but he felt it. This wasn't just a test drive. It was a beginning, a thread tying their battered pasts to something new. He didn't know where it'd lead, but for the first time in years, he wanted to find out. Viv glanced at him, her hands steady on the wheel. "You're good company, Ray Thompson," she said. "Don't let anyone tell you different," he chuckled, leaning back. "Right back at you, Viv, no last name." And as the truck rolled on, carrying them through the quiet night, Ray felt a flicker of something he'd almost forgotten. Hope, fragile but real, like the first green shoot after a long winter. The morning after the test drive broke cool and clear over Forsyth, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves outside Ray Thompson's garage. He stood at his workbench, a cup of lukewarm coffee in hand, staring at the truck with a mix of satisfaction and unease. It was running smoother now, the engine humming like it had a new lease on life, but Ray couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Viv had left late last night after their impromptu ride, her quiet, "See you tomorrow," lingering in the air like a promise. He'd lain awake too long after that, replaying her words about the truck, the road, the dreams she'd chased. She was getting under his skin, and he wasn't sure what to make of it. He was midway through checking the brakes when the bell above the garage door jingled. Viv stepped in, carrying 2 styrofoam cups from Millie's diner, the faint scent of fresh coffee wafting ahead of her. "Figured you'd need a refill," she said, handing him one. "Black, right?" "Like my soul," Ray quipped, taking it with a nod. "Thanks. You're spoiling me, Viv." "Someone's gotta," she replied, settling onto her usual stool with a grin. She looked lighter today, her denim jacket slung over her shoulders, her hair catching the sunlight streaming through the window. They fell into an easy rhythm. Ray tinkering with the truck, Viv sipping her coffee and tossing out the occasional question about spark plugs or timing belts. It felt good, this quiet camaraderie, like a song he hadn't realized he'd missed. They'd been at it an hour when she said, almost offhand, "You ever been to Savannah, Ray? They've got that vintage car rally coming up next month. This old girl might just fit right in." He paused, a wrench hovering over the brake line. "Savannah?" He glanced at her, curious. "Heard of it, yeah. Big deal for car nuts. How'd you know I'd care?" Viv shrugged, but there was a flicker in her eyes, something knowing. "Just a hunch. You've got that look, like someone who'd get a kick out of pushing an engine to its limit." Ray chuckled, shaking his head. "Maybe 30 years ago. Used to dream about racing, stock cars, dirt tracks, the whole deal. Never made it past a few local runs before life took over." He tapped the wrench against the truck's fender, the memory bittersweet. "How'd you peg me for that?" "Lucky guess," she said too quick, and took a sip of her coffee to cover it. Ray didn't push, but her words from yesterday, about dreams worth fighting for, echoed in his head. She had a way of digging up things he'd buried, and it unsettled him as much as it intrigued him. The moment broke when a pickup rolled into the lot outside. Eddie, the tow guy, with his usual grin plastered across his face. "Hey, Ray," he called, hopping out. "Got a carburetor for that Chevy you've been nursing. Thought I'd swing by." His eyes landed on Viv, and his grin widened. "Well, hey there, Mom. Keeping this old grump company?" "Somebody's got to," Viv shot back, matching his tone. Eddie laughed, loud and easy, and hauled the part inside. But as he set it on the bench, his gaze lingered on Viv a beat too long. He leaned in close to Ray, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know who that is, right?" Ray frowned, wiping his hands on a rag. "Viv?" "Yeah, she's the one who brought the truck in." "What's your point?" Eddie's eyes widened like Ray had missed the punchline to a great joke. Viv, huh? That's cute. Buddy, that's Vivian Hart, the Vivian Hart, trucking queen turned billionaire, sold her company for millions back in the 90s, saw her picture in some old magazine at the barbershop last week. She's loaded, man. Ray froze, the rag slipping in his grip. What? Yeah, Eddie pressed, oblivious to the storm brewing in Ray's chest. Keeps a low profile now, but she's big time. What's a lady like that doing in Forsyth? Messing with junk like this? He jerked a thumb at the truck, then clapped Ray on the shoulder. Guess you hit the jackpot, huh? Ray didn't laugh. He turned to Viv, who was still perched on her stool, watching them with an unreadable expression. That true? He asked, voice low, steady, but edged with something sharp. Viv set her coffee down slow, like she was buying time. Eddie, right? She said, glancing at the tow guy. You got a hell of a memory and a big mouth. Eddie grinned, unabashed. Guilty as charged. I'll leave you two to sort this out. Carburetors on the house, Ray. Call it a tip for the show. He winked and swaggered back to his truck, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. Ray crossed his arms, staring at Viv. Vivian Hart, apparently. Billionaire, huh? That why you're paying double? Some rich lady's whim. It's not like that, she said, standing now, her hands raised like she could fend off his doubt. The money's not the point. This truck, it's not a whim. It's me, Ray. Everything I told you was true. Then why hide it? He snapped, louder than he meant to. You've been sitting here, letting me ramble about my broke-ass life, and you're, what, slumming it for kicks? No, she said, firm, stepping closer. I didn't tell you because I didn't want it to matter. People change when, they know, treat me like a bank account instead of a person. I wanted you to see me, not the headlines. Ray's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe her. Those green eyes were steady, pleading, but the sting of being played cut deep. Should have said something, he muttered, turning back to the truck. I don't like being the last to know. I know, she said softly. I'm sorry, Ray. I should have trusted you with it, but I didn't lie about who I am, not the parts that count. He didn't respond, just picked up his wrench and started working again, the clank of metal a shield against. The tangle in his head. Viv watched him for a long moment, then grabbed her jacket. I'll give you some space, she said, but I'm not done here, not with the truck and not with you. Think about that. She walked out, the bell jingling behind her, and Ray let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Eddie's words looped in his mind, billionaire trucking queen, and clashed with the Viv he'd come to know, the woman who'd held an umbrella over him in the rain, who'd laughed at the truck's growl like it was music. Was it all a game? Or was she more like him than he'd thought? Someone who'd fought for a life, only to find it lonelier than expected. He glanced at the notebook on the bench, its pages full of a girl's dreams, and felt a flicker of something. Anger, maybe, but also curiosity. Vivian Hart wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was a puzzle, and Ray wasn't sure he could walk away without solving it. Night had fallen thick and heavy over Forsyth, the kind of darkness that swallowed the stars and left only the faint glow of Ray Thompson's garage piercing through. Inside, the air was sharp with the tang of gasoline and the low hum of an old Johnny Cash tune crackling from the radio. Ray sat on a stool by the workbench, the rusted truck looming behind him like a silent witness. His hands were idle, unusual for a man who'd spent decades fixing things, but his mind was anything but. The wrench lay abandoned beside the coffee. Viv had brought that morning, now cold and untouched since she'd walked out. He couldn't get her out of his head. Vivian Hart, billionaire, trucking queen, whatever Eddie had called her. The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else, not the woman who'd sat here sharing fried chicken and stories of hauling scrap. Ray rubbed a hand over his face, the stubble rough against his palm. He'd snapped at her, and part of him regretted it. The part that remembered her holding that umbrella in the rain, her quiet laugh when the truck roared to life. But the other part, the one bruised by years of scraping by, couldn't shake the sting of being kept in the dark. Was he just a project to her? A charity case? The bell above the door jingled, pulling him from his brooding. Viv stepped in, her silhouette framed by the night, her expression unreadable under the dim light. She carried no coffee this time, just her denim jacket and a resolve that hung in the air like static. "Figured you'd still be here," she said, her voice steady, but softer than before. "Can we talk?" Ray didn't move, his arms crossed tight over his chest. "Thought you were giving me space." "I was," she replied, stepping closer, "but I don't run from messes I make. And I made one with you." She stopped a few feet away, close enough that he could see the lines around her eyes, lines that spoke of hard years, not just wealth. "I owe you the truth, Ray, all of it." He met her gaze, his jaw tight. "Go on, then." Viv took a breath like she was steadying herself for a leap. "I told you about the truck, how it got me out of nothing. That's real. What I didn't say is what came after. I built a company, made a fortune, lost more friends than I kept. Money changes people, changes how they see you. I got tired of it, so I walked away. Been living quiet for years, just me and my ghosts. This truck," she glanced at it, her voice catching. "It's the last piece of who I was before all that. I wanted it back, not for the money, but for me." Ray listened, his anger softening. At the edges, but not gone. "So why the act? Why not just say it? Hey, I'm Vivian Hart. I've got millions. Fix my truck." "Because I didn't want you to look at me like Eddie did," she said, her eyes locking on his. "Like I'm some big shot who doesn't belong here. I've had enough of that. With you, it was different. You treated me like a person, not a paycheck. I didn't want to lose that." He let her words settle, chewing on them. There was truth there. He could hear it, feel it. But trust was a fragile thing, and his had taken a hit. "Should have given me a chance to prove I wouldn't," he said finally. "I'm not some kid who'd kiss your boots for $1. "I know that now," Viv said, stepping closer still. "And I'm sorry, Ray. I should have trusted you. I'm asking you to trust me now. Not the billionaire, just me. Vivian, the girl who wrote that notebook, who's still trying to figure out what matters." Ray looked away, his gaze landing on the truck, on the notebook and the photograph beside it. That girl with the wildflowers, the one who'd fought her way up from nothing. He saw her in Viv now, in the way she stood there, vulnerable but unbowed. Something shifted in him, a crack in the wall he'd built. "All right," he said, voice gruff. "But no more secrets. I don't play games." "No more," she promised, a faint smile breaking through. "You've got my word." He nodded, the tension easing just enough to breathe. Then Viv surprised him. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled flyer, smoothing it on the bench. "Found this at Millie's," she said. "That vintage rally in Savannah. It's in 3 weeks. Thought maybe we could take her there. Together." Ray stared at the flyer, bold letters shouting "Savannah Classic Car Rally," pictures of gleaming old Fords and Chevys lining the page. His pulse quickened, an echo of that old racing dream stirring in his chest. "You serious?" he asked, looking up at her. "Dead serious," she said. "You said you used to race. This truck's got life in her now, thanks to you. Why not see what she can do, what we can do?" He opened his mouth to say no. Too old, too broke, too late. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, he saw himself behind the wheel, the wind in his face, the crowd's roar in his ears. And Viv beside him, her grin matching his own. It was crazy, reckless even, but damn if it didn't feel right. "I don't need your pity," he said, testing her one last time. "This isn't pity," she shot back, fierce. "It's a chance, for both of us. I've been running from my past too long. Maybe you have too. Let's stop running, Ray. Let's drive." He held her gaze, searching for a lie and finding none. Slowly, he uncrossed his arms, letting them fall to his sides. "All right," he said at last. "Savannah it is. But we're doing it my way, no fancy shortcuts. We fix her up proper and we race her fair." "Deal," Viv said, her smile widening. She stuck out her hand, and he took it, her grip firm, warm, a promise sealed. They stood there a moment, the truck between them, its rusted shell a testament to second chances. As Viv grabbed a wrench to help him finish the brakes, Ray felt the weight lift. Just a little, but enough. She wasn't just Vivian Hart, billionaire. She was Viv, the fighter, the dreamer, and maybe, just maybe, a friend. The road to Savannah stretched out in his mind, full of unknowns, but for the first time in years, Ray wasn't afraid to take it. Together, they'd breathe life into more than just a truck. They'd resurrect dreams neither had dared to touch till now. The road to Savannah unfurled, beneath a sky streaked with dawn's first light, the rusted truck rumbling steady as Ray Thompson gripped the passenger seat. 3 weeks had blurred past since Viv's wild idea took root, and now here they were. 2 unlikely partners chasing a vintage car rally with nothing but grit and a rebuilt engine. Ray glanced at Viv behind the wheel, her hands sure, her eyes fixed ahead. The truck wasn't showroom ready, its paint still flaked, its body scarred. But it ran like a dream, a testament to Ray's hands and Viv's faith. They'd poured every spare hour into it, late nights in the garage trading stories and tools, and somehow it had become more than a machine. It was theirs. Savannah greeted them with a buzz of excitement, the rally grounds alive with polished chrome and roaring. Engines, vintage Mustangs, gleamed beside souped-up Chevys. Their owners, mostly younger hotshots with sponsors and swagger, eyeing Ray and Viv's truck with smirks. Ray felt the weight of their stares as he climbed out, his flannel shirt and worn jeans, a stark contrast to the leather jackets and logoed caps around him. "We're out of our league," he muttered, kicking a tire. Viv adjusted her cap, a beat-up Braves hat she dug out of the truck's glove box, and grinned. "Maybe. But we're not here to win their game. We're here for ours." She clapped him on the shoulder, her touch steadying him, and headed to register. Ray watched her weave through the crowd, a mix of nerves and pride churning in his gut. She'd paid the entry fee, insisted on it, saying it was her dream too, and he'd let her, though it still pricked at his pride. But this wasn't about money anymore. It was about the road they'd built together. The rally was a 10-mile course, tight turns, straightaways, and a dirt stretch that'd test any engine's mettle. Ray took the wheel for the run, Viv beside him as co-pilot, her notebook open to scribble notes on the fly. The horn blared, and they were off. The truck, lurching forward with a growl that drowned out the doubters. Ray's hands tightened on the steering wheel, the old thrill of speed flooding back, wind whipping through the cracked window, the horizon blurring past. "She's holding!" he shouted over the noise, a grin splitting his face. "Damn right. She is!" Viv yelled back, her laugh wild and free. She called out turns, left in 50 yards, watch the dip. And Ray followed, their rhythm seamless. The truck wasn't the fastest. Sleeker cars zipped by, their engines screaming, but it powered through, steady and stubborn. Ray felt it in his bones. The same fire he'd known on those dirt tracks. Decades ago, rekindled now with Viv's voice in his ear, they hit the dirt stretch at mile 7, dust billowing around them like a storm. The truck jolted, tires skidding, and Ray's heart leapt as the steering wheel bucked in his hands. "Hang on!" he barked, wrestling it back. Beside him, Viv gripped the dash, her eyes wide but fearless. Then, a sickening lurch. The rear. Axle groaned, metal grinding, and the truck swerved hard. Ray slammed the brakes, pulling them to a stop just off the track as smoke curled from under the hood. "Son of a—" Ray cut himself off, kicking open the door. He jumped out, Viv right behind, and popped the hood. The axle linkage had snapped. A clean break, no quick fix. Around them, other racers sped past, their taillights fading into the dust. Ray's fists clenched, frustration boiling up. "We're done," he growled. "Should have known better than to drag this heap out here." Viv crouched beside him, peering at the damage. "Hey," she said, her voice cutting through his anger. "Look at me." He did, reluctantly, and found her eyes steady, unbroken. "We're not done. We made it this far, 7 miles farther than anyone thought we could. That's not nothing, Ray." He wanted to argue, to let the disappointment win, but her words held him. She stood, dusting off her jeans, and grabbed his arm. "Come on. We'll limp her to the finish. Together." Before he could protest, she climbed back in, cranking. The engine, it sputtered, coughed, but caught, a weak pulse, but enough. Ray slid in beside her, and they coaxed the truck forward, inching along the final miles as the crowd's cheers faded into the distance. They crossed the finish line dead last, the truck wheezing like an old man after a sprint. The other racers were already parked, popping beers and slapping backs, but Ray and Viv didn't care. They climbed out, leaning against the hood, breathless and grinning like fools. A kid, some teenage volunteer, ran up with a clipboard. "Tough break," he said, glancing at the truck. "You're a 40th out of 40, but you finished." "40th's fine by me," Viv said, nudging Ray. "Beats sitting on the sidelines." Ray chuckled, the knot in his chest loosening. "Yeah, beats it by a mile." He looked at her, hair tangled, dirt smudged on her cheek, and saw the girl from the notebook again, the one who'd never quit. "You're something else, Viv." "Right. Back at you," she replied, her smile soft but fierce. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the field, and for a moment they just stood there, the truck warm beneath their hands. They hadn't won, not by the rally's rules, but Ray felt a victory deeper than trophies. He'd driven that course, felt the rush again, and he hadn't done it alone. As the crowd thinned, a grizzled old racer wandered over, white hair, leather vest, a beer in hand. "Saw you two out there," he said, nodding at the truck. "She's a beauty, rough but real. Reminds me of my first ride. You keep her going, here?" "Plan 2, Ray said, surprised at the warmth in his own voice. The man tipped his beer and ambled off, leaving Ray and Viv alone again. "Guess we're not the only ones who see it," Viv said, leaning closer. "This truck's still got stories to tell. And we've got time to tell them," Ray added, meeting her gaze. The air between them shifted, charged with something unspoken but alive. They'd face the race, the break, the finish, and come out stronger. Ray didn't know what lay ahead, but he knew one thing. This wasn't the end of their road. It was just the start of a new stretch, one they'd travel side by side. The truck sat there, battered but proud, a mirror to the two souls who'd brought it back. And as the stars began to prick the sky, Ray felt a quiet certainty settle in. He was alive again, and so was she. The Savannah rally faded into dusk as Ray Thompson and Vivian Hart drove their battered truck away from the finish line, the hum of the crowd giving way to the quiet chirp of crickets. They found a spot just beyond the grounds, a patch of grass, near a stand of oaks, where the glow of the event's lights barely reached. Ray pulled the truck to a stop, its engine ticking as it cooled, and climbed out with a groan. Every muscle ached from the race, but his chest felt lighter than it had in years. Beside him, Viv stretched her arms overhead, her Braves cap tilted back, a grin still tugging at her lips. "Not a bad day's work," she said, kicking off her boots and tossing them into the truck's bed. 40th place and a busted axle. "We're legends already," Ray chuckled, shaking his head. "Legends of something, all right. Mostly stubbornness." He grabbed a couple of folding chairs from the cab, ones he'd thrown in on a whim, and set them up near the tailgate. Viv rummaged in the back, pulling out a small bundle of firewood she'd stashed before they left Forsyth. "You planned this?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Call it optimism," she replied, stacking the wood into a neat pile. "Figured we'd either celebrate or lick our wounds. Either way, a fire sounded good." She struck a match, the flame catching quick, and soon a modest blaze crackled between them, spitting sparks into the twilight. They settled into the chairs, the warmth of the fire chasing off the evening chill. Ray leaned back, watching the flames dance, their light flickering across Viv's face. She looked different out here, less guarded, her sharp edges softened by the glow. The race had stripped away some of their walls, leaving a raw, honest ease he hadn't expected. "You were right," he said, breaking the silence. "About today. Didn't matter where we placed. Felt good to run it." Viv nodded, poking the fire with a stick. "Told you. Sometimes it's not about winning. It's about showing up. You showed up, Ray, big time." She glanced at him, her green eyes catching the light, and he felt a pull, subtle but strong. He shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. "Guess you did too. Could have bailed when she broke down, but you didn't. Kept me going." "That's what partners do," she said simply, and the word hung there. Partners. It wasn't just about the truck anymore, and they both knew it. The fire popped, sending a shower of embers skyward, and Viv leaned forward, her voice dropping. "Can I tell you something?" "Go ahead," Ray said, bracing himself. With Viv, he never knew what might come next. She took a breath, staring into the flames. "I've been alone a long time. After I sold the company, I had everything. Money, houses, people begging to be near me. But it was empty. I'd look at this truck, sitting in some fancy garage, and think about the girl who drove it, the one who had nothing but hope. I lost her somewhere along the way. Today, I felt her again. Because of you." Ray swallowed, her words sinking deep. He saw it now, the loneliness behind her grit, the same kind he'd carried since Clara died. "I get that," he said, voice rough. "Lost a piece of myself too. Racing was my thing, made me feel alive. When Clara got sick, then Jake came. Along I let it go, figured that was it, but you dragged me back out there, made me remember." Viv smiled, faint but real. "Guess we're good for each other then." "Guess so," he murmured, and the air shifted again, heavier this time. He looked at her, really looked, and saw more than the billionaire or the girl with wildflowers. He saw a woman who'd fought, fallen, and kept going, just like him. His hand rested on the arm of his chair, inches from hers, and he felt the urge to close that gap. But he hesitated. Old habits, old fears. Viv didn't. She reached over, her fingers brushing his, tentative but warm. "Ray," she said, soft, but sure, "I've spent years looking for something real. I think I found it here, with you." His heart thudded, loud enough he was sure she'd hear it. He turned his hand, lacing his fingers through hers, calluses meeting calluses. "Me too," he said, the words spilling out before he could overthink them. "Didn't expect it, but yeah, you're real, Viv. More than I've had in a long damn time." She squeezed his hand, her eyes glistening, not with tears, but with something brighter. "Good," she whispered, "because I'm not letting go of this, of us." Ray leaned closer, the fire's heat mingling with the warmth, spreading through him. "Neither am I," he said, and then he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or frantic, just a slow, steady press of lips, tasting of coffee and dust and promises. She kissed him back, her hand sliding to his cheek, and for a moment the world shrank to just them, the crackle of the fire, the beat of their hearts, the truck standing guard. When they pulled apart, breathless, Viv laughed, a low, joyful sound that made Ray's chest ache in the best way. "Well," she said, resting her forehead against his, "that's one way to cap off a race." "Best finish yet," he replied, grinning like a fool. They sat there, hands still linked, watching the fire burn down to embers. The night stretched out vast and quiet, but it didn't feel empty. Not anymore. Ray thought of Clara, the life he'd lost, and realized this wasn't a betrayal. It was a new chapter, one Clara would have wanted for him. And Viv, she was the kind of woman who'd fight for it with him, not against him. As the last flames flickered out, Viv leaned her head on his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. "And what now?" she asked, voice sleepy but content. Ray tightened his grip on her hand. "We fix the truck, head home, figure it out together." Together, she echoed, and it sounded like a vow. The stars wheeled overhead, and Ray felt it, a peace he hadn't known he could find again. They'd raced, they'd broken, they'd mended, and now they'd begun. The road ahead was theirs to take, 1 mile at a time. The drive back to Forsyth from Savannah was a quiet one, the truck's engine humming steady beneath the weight of a new dawn. Ray Thompson sat behind the wheel, one hand resting on the gear shift, the other brushing Vivian Hart's fingers where they lay intertwined on the seat between them. The memory of last night's firelight kiss still warmed him, a soft glow that lingered despite the ache in his bones from the race. Beside him, Viv leaned against the window, her Braves cap pulled low, her breath slow and even as she dozed. Ray glanced at her, a smile tugging at his lips. She looked peaceful, tough, beautiful, and his, in a way he hadn't dared hope for. They rolled into town just as the sun cleared the horizon, painting the sleepy streets gold. Ray pulled the truck into his garage lot, cutting the engine with a contented sigh. "Home, sweet home," he murmured, nudging Viv awake. She stirred, blinking at him with a sleepy grin. "Best road trip yet," she said, stretching. "Even with the busted axle." "Damn straight," Ray agreed, climbing out. He was halfway to the house when the screen door banged open, and Jake stepped onto the porch. Tall, lanky, his dark hair a mess from sleep. Ray's heart lifted. He hadn't expected his son back from Atlanta so soon. "Dad," Jake called, squinting against the light. "What's with the noise?" "Thought you were—" He stopped, spotting Viv as she climbed out of the truck, dusting off her jeans. His eyes narrowed, flicking between her and Ray. "Who's this?" Ray waved him over, pride and nerves tangling in his chest. "Jake, this is Vivian Hart. She's a friend. Helped me fix up the truck. Ran it in Savannah yesterday." Viv stepped forward, offering a hand. "Good to meet you, Jake. Heard a lot about you." Jake shook her hand, but his grip was stiff, his smile thin. "Yeah, same. Savannah, huh? That why you're rolling in at dawn?" His tone carried an edge Ray didn't miss. "Long story," Ray said, clapping Jake on the shoulder. "Come. Inside, coffee's calling. You can tell me why you're back early." They filed into the kitchen, the truck left to rest in the yard. Ray fired up the percolator while Jake leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching Viv with a wariness that set Ray's teeth on edge. Viv, for her part, stayed easy, sipping her coffee, chatting about the rally like it was just another day. But Jake wasn't buying it. "So," he said, cutting through her story about the dirt stretch, "you're the one paying Dad to fix that heap? What's the deal? Some kind of hobby?" Viv paused, her cup halfway to her lips. "Something like that," she said carefully. "It's my truck. Been with me a long time. Your dad's the best I've seen at bringing it back." Jake's eyes flicked to Ray, hard and searching. "Right. And you just happened to roll into Forsyth with a fat wallet and a sob story?" "Jake," Ray warned, voice low, "ease up." "No, Dad, you ease up," Jake snapped, stepping forward. "I heard about her, Vivian Hart, big shot billionaire. Some guy at Millie's was yapping about it last night. She's loaded, and you're out here playing grease monkey for her? What's she really after?" Ray's jaw tightened, heat creeping up his neck. "She's not after anything. We're partners. Fixed the truck together, ran it together. That's it." "Partners?" Jake laughed, sharp and bitter. "Come on, Dad. She's got millions. She doesn't need you. She'll use you up and leave just like—" He cut himself off, but the unspoken hung heavy. "Just like Mom couldn't stay." Viv set her cup down, her face calm, but her eyes steely. "Jake, I get it. You don't know me, and you're looking out for your dad, but I'm not here to take anything from him. He's given me more than I could have asked for, stuff money can't buy." "Like what?" Jake shot back. "A thrill, a project. You'll get bored and bounce. People like you always do." "That's enough," Ray barked, slamming his mug on the counter. Coffee sloshed over the rim, but he didn't care. "You don't talk to her like that, not in my house. Viv's not some rich snob slumming it. She's real, Jake. More real than half the folks I've known." Jake stared at him, jaw working, then shook his head. Fine. Believe what you want. But when she's gone, don't say I didn't warn you. He stormed out, the screen door banging shut behind him. Silence fell, thick and heavy. Ray ran a hand through his hair, frustration boiling under his skin. Damn kid, he muttered. Sorry, Viv. He's not usually like this. Don't be, she said, stepping closer. He's scared, Ray. Scared you'll get hurt. I'd be the same if it were my dad. She touched his arm, her hand steady. He'll come around. Maybe, Ray said, but doubt gnawed at him. Jake's words echoed old fears. Fears of being left, of not being enough. He looked at Viv, her green eyes soft but unflinching, and wanted to believe her. You didn't have to stick up for me. Yeah, I did, she replied, squeezing his arm. You've stuck up for me plenty. Besides, I meant it. You've given me something real. I'm not running, Ray. Not from you, not from this. He nodded, the knot in his chest loosening just a bit. Good, 'cause I'm not either. He pulled her into a hug, brief but tight, her warmth grounding him. They stood there a moment, the coffee forgotten, until the phone rang, shrill and insistent. Ray grabbed it, frowning at the unfamiliar number. Yeah, Mr. Thompson? A crisp voice said. This is Margaret Evans, Ms. Hart's assistant. I'm calling about the truck project. She's overdue for a board meeting in Atlanta tomorrow. We'll need her back tonight. Ray's gut twisted. He handed the phone to Viv, watching her face tighten as she listened. I'll handle it, Margaret, she said, then hung up, turning to him. They tracked me down. Guess my quiet life's not so quiet anymore. You going? He asked, voice steady, but his heart wasn't. Have to, she said, regret lacing her words. But I'll be back. Day after tomorrow, tops. This isn't goodbye, Ray. He nodded, but Jake's warning rang in his ears. All right. Drive safe. She kissed him, quick, fierce, then grabbed her jacket. Keep the truck warm for me, she said, and then she was gone, her rental car kicking up dust as it disappeared down the road. Ray stood alone in the kitchen, the silence pressing in. He wanted to trust her, did trust her, but the shadows of doubt crept close. Outside, the truck sat waiting, a rusted anchor in a storm he hadn't seen coming. He'd fought for it, fought for her. Now he'd see if that fight was enough. Rain streaked down the windows of Ray Thompson's kitchen, a steady drumbeat against the quiet of Forsyth. It had been 2 days since Vivian Hart left for Atlanta, her kiss still burning on his lips, her promise, I'll be back, echoing in his ears. Ray stood at the sink, washing the same mug for the 3rd time, his hands moving on autopilot while his mind churned. The truck sat silent in the garage, its rusted shell a reminder of the road they'd traveled together. And the one he wasn't sure she'd return to. Jake's words gnawed at him. She'll leave, Dad. People like her always do. He wanted to shake them off, but doubt was a stubborn weed, rooting deep. The screen door creaked, and Jake stepped in, shaking water from his jacket. He'd stayed. After their blowout sleeping on the couch, a silent truce between them. Still raining, he said, eyeing Ray. You look like hell. Thanks, Ray grunted, setting the mug down. You here to gloat? Jake sighed, leaning against the counter. No, just checking on you. She call yet? Ray shook his head, staring out at the grey. Said she'd be back today, meeting's over by now. He didn't say the rest, how every passing hour tightened the knot in his chest, how he'd started to wonder if Jake was right. Jake hesitated, then pulled a chair out and sat. Look, Dad, I was harsh the other day. I don't know her, not like you do. But I've seen you happy lately. Happier than since Mom. If she's part of that, maybe I'm wrong. Ray turned, surprised. That an apology? Close as you'll get, Jake said with a half smile. Just don't want you hurt, that's all. I know, Ray said, softening. Appreciate it, kid. He clapped Jake's shoulder, a weight lifting, small but enough to breathe. They sat in silence, the rain a steady companion, until headlights cut through the gloom outside. Ray's heart jumped. He stepped onto the porch, Jake behind him, as a rental car rolled up the drive. Viv climbed out, her hair damp, her denim jacket clinging to her shoulders. She carried a duffel bag, not the sleek briefcase Ray had half expected, and her face broke into a tired, radiant smile when she saw him. "Told you I'd be back," she called, trudging through the mud. Ray met her halfway, rain soaking his shirt, and pulled her into his arms without a word. She hugged him back, fierce and unyielding, her breath warm against his neck. "Missed you," she whispered, and the doubt in his chest crumbled like dry earth under the downpour. "Missed. You too," he said, voice rough. He pulled back, searching her eyes. "Everything all right?" "Better than all right," she said, squeezing his hand. "Come inside. I've got something to tell you." They filed into the kitchen, Jake lingering by the door, curiosity warring. With his guarded stance, Viv dropped her bag and faced Ray, her expression a mix of nerves and resolve. "Atlanta was a mess," she started. "Board wanted me back full-time, new projects, big money. Margaret had a whole speech about responsibility to shareholders. I listened, nodded, then told them I'm done." Ray blinked. "Done?" "Done," she repeated firm. "Sold my stake, most of it anyway. Kept enough to live, but the rest, gone. I'm not that person anymore, Ray. I haven't been for a long time. I want this, us, Forsyth, the truck, a real life, not a balance sheet." He stared at her, the words sinking in slow. "You gave it up? All that? For this?" "For me," she corrected, stepping closer. "And for you, if you'll have me. I've spent years chasing what I thought mattered, only to end up empty. You gave me something better, something worth keeping. I choose this, Ray, I choose you." His throat tightened, a rush of warmth flooding him. He'd braced for her to leave, to slip back into a world he couldn't follow, but here she was, stripping it all away for a muddy town and a man with grease-stained hands. "Viv," he said, voice breaking, "you sure?" "Never been surer," she replied, her eyes steady. She turned to Jake, who'd gone still by the door. "I know you don't trust me yet, Jake, I get it. But I'm not here to take him from you. I'm here to stay, for both of you, if you'll let me." Jake shifted, his guard cracking. "You're crazy," he said, but there was a flicker of respect in it. "Giving up millions for this dump?" "Best dump I've ever seen," Viv shot back, grinning. Jake snorted, then nodded, a small, reluctant peace offering. Ray pulled her close again, this time kissing her. Slow, deep, the rain a soft applause outside. "You're crazy," he murmured, against her lips, "and I'm damn glad you are." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "Good, because I've got plans, starting with that truck. We're not done with her yet." Days turned to weeks, then months, and the seasons shifted over Forsyth like pages in a book. The truck, once a rusted relic, stood reborn in Ray's garage, its body patched, its red paint gleaming fresh under a new coat. But it wasn't just a showpiece. Viv had a vision, and Ray was all in. Together, they turned an old barn on the edge of town into a trade school, a place for kids with nowhere else to go, teaching them engines, welding, the kind of skills that had saved them both. The Thompson Hart Garage, they called it, a name that made Ray grin every time he saw the sign. A year later, on a crisp fall day, the school opened its doors. The lot buzzed with life. Kids tinkering with junkers, locals dropping off tools and snacks, Jake even pitching in to teach a class on oil changes. Ray stood by the truck, now parked proud in the yard, watching Viv hand out aprons to a gaggle of teenagers. She caught his eye and waved, her smile as bright as the day they'd met. That evening, they drove the truck up a hill overlooking town, just the two of them. The sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of gold and amber, and they sat on the tailgate, legs dangling, hands clasped. "Look at that," Viv said, nodding at the lights twinkling below. We did that, Ray. Together. Yeah, he said, squeezing her hand. Never thought I'd get here. New start, new family. You made it happen. We made it happen, she corrected, leaning her head on his shoulder. You fixed more than a truck, you know. You fixed me. He turned, kissing her forehead. Right back at you, Viv. They sat in silence, the world soft and still around them until she spoke again. Think we'll keep going. More roads? More dreams? Count on it, Ray said, his voice steady. Long as we've got this truck and each other, we've got all we need. Below, Forsyth glowed. A small town made bigger by their love, their work, their choice. To stay. The truck stood as proof. A rusted dream turned miracle, a bridge from their pasts to a future they'd built mile by mile. And as the stars blinked awake, Ray knew this wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning, one that would roll on, carrying them forward with every turn of the wheel. Hey, what did you think of Ray and Vivian's journey? Where are you tuning in from? Georgia, somewhere across the states, or maybe halfway around the world? Drop a comment and let me know. If you enjoyed this ride, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story. Thanks so much for watching. You're the heart of this channel, and I'm grateful for every one of you.